Hi, everyone. Welcome to Radiant Living, Inspiring Humanity to Thrive. I'm Marisa B, and today I have with me Julia Wood. Julia is an author, novelist, award winner. Thank you so much for coming today, Julia. You've so many awards that you've won. Only recently, correct? You've won one just last week.
Yes, Jenny Bean. There's a short story, which is a sequel to my main novel, The Adventures of Jenny Bean, age 49. There's an awful lot. And that novel was written during the lockdown. And my character, Jenny Bean, starts this blog basically to pass the time, but also to challenge a lot of the stereotypes about older women and how we are perceived by society.
And I have to say that it's a comedy, but it's maybe a dramedy too, right? You would say possibly a dramedy because it does address serious issues about older women. And I know that, but it is very much in line with comedy. And, today we're talking a little bit about how comedy heals, right? Yes. I mean, it's a way in which we heal. And I know that you're a serious author. Your book on Oscar Wilde is absolutely fabulous. I'd like to start maybe with a little bit like that. Can you first explain how you got into this? How did you decide to be a writer, an author, a novelist? How did that all start?
Well, really, since forever, really. I mean, I actually put on my website that I started writing before I could actually read, and my mum would come in and take dictation from me when I was still in a crib or something. That's how it literally was. Not for my mum, it disturbed her sleep. But I guess that I've always written and I've always wanted to be a writer. It's just something I've always wanted to be. I had a brief flirtation with trying to get into the music business, which didn't happen. But that was because I wanted to perform and write lyrics, because I do also perform as well. I'm a performer as well of comedy mainly, poetry, slam poetry, comedy,
and a designer,
yes.
Right? You're a fashion designer. You create fashion, mostly Victorian, that you also wear.
Yes, I design. I don't make it, but I design it. Yes.
Yes. And yes, and you actually wear it. You wear it. And I know that during the pandemic, you actually had a YouTube channel, and it was concerning Victorian pantaloons, right? You were wearing a different pair.
Right, yes. And it was a series of comedy sketches I devised based on the Julia's lockdown loungewear designs, which were designed to sit around the house in, but sort of still feel glamorous and feel not like you were completely turning into some kind of pseudo bag lady or whatever.
Yes, right, because you were dressed up in your home because we could have so easily fallen into not taking care of ourselves.
Yes, and I think that was a big part of it, to be honest. I think that I was very much of the opinion that I think making an effort with your appearance is very important for your mental health, to be honest. So, and I did have a bad time of it during the lockdown with my mental health, because I was all right at first, but then it was like Leicester got kept back during lockdown. We were like the neglected city, and I actually found it hard to deal with. So I did do things to kind of buoy up my spirits, I guess, writing and performing and designing things, and use my creativity very much to kind of manage those feelings.
Yes, it was, and that was almost like, I mean, I'm not sure if you wrote it or not, but it seemed it was almost like stream of consciousness, because you were talking. I watched the program, of course, and I loved the outfits every day. Every time you were on was a different outfit, and they were all so lovely. And of course, your home is spectacular, true Victorian decorating in your home. So of course, the scenery for your videos was gorgeous, and you spoke about things that were really going on television and writing and things that were happening, but with a comic bent.
Yes, definitely. And I was just taking a comic look at various popular TV programs and talking about that. So, but it was just really, as much as anything, I was using it to kind of keep myself from feeling too fed up. And if it cheered other people up too, then that was a bonus,
But you did start to write this. Well, no, you've written about this character before. Your first book was with Jenny, and it was already written. This was the second one that you've done now during the lockdown, correct?
No, the first one was written during the lockdown. The Adventures of Jenny Bean, age 49, in an awful lot, was written during the lockdown.
Oh, so that was the first one. Okay.
First one, just to confuse you, yeah. But the sequel is being published before the novel, so the novel will be the prequel. just to confuse everybody. And it's called Jenny Bean Calamity Queen, and it's being published with Farrago Press next year through Comedy Women in Print, because I'm shortlisted for that prize. And so it was really like, again, I took this character who's blogging to sort of pass the time, but also to connect with people as well, and to sort of feel like there's a world out there, you know.
Yes, and because it was very difficult for many people during that time. And of course, especially when everything was shut down. I mean, I know that slowly things began to open. It still had not gone back 100%, but the complete lockdown was quite frightening for many people.
Right. I think it was a bit like, you know, the foundations of civilization trembled, you know, and I know people say it's our war, and I don't know if that's a bit extreme. I mean, my mum lived through the war, and I can't imagine what that was like. That went on for 6 years, and there were bombs, you know, it must have been absolutely terrifying. But it's the nearest we've had to that threat to our kind of infrastructures and civilization, isn't it? That we
yes, it is. It is. Right. What we thought was normal was no longer normal. What we thought we could do every day, we could no longer do. It's true.
Yes.
And yet somehow comedy came through for you, right? I mean, is that just that? Have you always naturally been a comedian? I mean, it's very funny with a lot, and it was just really observations in life, especially the YouTube channel with the observations.
Yes, I think it was observations in life, but I've always been. It's really weird because I've suffered all my life terrible depression, and comedy is just this very powerful cathartic tool to use. And I don't necessarily know that I've always employed it consciously, but obviously once you become aware of something, then it becomes conscious. You know, I am doing this because it has that kind of cathartic effect and purges some of the melancholy or whatever. Yeah.
And it's amazing to hear that you've always suffered from depression, and yet you have. But you are very funny. You are very comedic, and so and it's funny because it's helping the audience. Really, it's helping others. It's helping others to laugh and to understand how much laughter really can be a cure, can be healing, can be cathartic for people.
Absolutely, I think that. I think that was the idea behind it, and I was conscious very much during the lockdown that there are a lot of people out there that are feeling really discombobulated and mixed up and disorientated, really, and that if you know there's anything that I or anyone else can do that's creative to kind of help people to be less depressed or just feel less fed up, you know, just bring a smile to someone's face, that's great. You know, that's really what comedy is. And I think that the thing with comedy that I find kind of rather interesting is that people will see it as some people see it as a trivial thing. You know, it's when you write comedy, people think that somehow you're not a serious writer. But of course, when you look at, say, for example, the comedies of Oscar Wilde, he was very, very astute at underpinning deep problems within society, but doing it in this really seemingly light-hearted way. And so I don't think that the humour has to beget any kind of or sort of, you know, any seriousness underlying. I think you can have those darker undertones that you don't say, but that are there and inferred. And I think that, and that aside, I think another reason why I say comedy is a very serious thing is because it's important. Its seriousness comes from its importance. We've never lived in more miserable, frightening times, have we? And I think more than ever that laughter is just so important.
Well, yes. I mean, they know scientifically that you use so many muscles when you're laughing. And when you laugh out loud, you actually start to feel better. There are actually now different kinds of healing methods where people laugh out loud to feel better, to heal, to begin to heal.
Definitely. I mean, there was a column in the Reader's Digest for years. I don't read it anymore. It's still there, called "Laughter is the Best Medicine." But actually, the body does produce hormones that help it to heal through laughter, because, you know, endorphins, for example, and it releases, you know, these chemicals into your system that are positive and good.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it does. Even if you don't know that it's happening, right? I mean, now we know because of articles that are out there and scientific methods that they're testing. But you know, when you're doing it, that you begin to feel better. Yes. You know, and like a child, right? You ever see children that just big belly laugh chuckle that just is so glorious for them, you know, and how that actually makes other people feel, right? How that makes other people feel when they see that.
Yes, and I think laughter is a very, very contagious thing. I mean, I would say that about all human emotion to a degree. I mean, I'm quite empathic, so if I see someone crying, it'll probably set me off. But also, you know, when someone's laughing and you want to know what they're laughing at, and even when you don't know what they're laughing at, you start laughing eventually. Mm-hmm. There's something so incredibly contagious about laughter, isn't there?
It is true. It is true. And when there's so much to cry about in the world, why not laugh? You know, we need all that laughter all the more. But tell me a little bit about the story. You write about Jenny, and she's 49.
Yes.
And can you tell us a little bit about the story?
Yeah, she's going through the menopause during lockdown, and she has a rather embarrassing crush on Matt Hancock. She blames her hormones. But she's also got, her mother has gone a bit doolally and tried to disinfect the Amazon man, and she's kind of worried about her, and she's trying to actually get help for her, but it's really hard to get help for people during that time because a lot of mental health services weren't, you know, available, and so there's that underlying thing. But then obviously there's a lot of polarity too, because she just does these mad things. Like there's one time when her cat goes missing. She has a cat called Brexit, and Brexit goes missing. And of course she's running through the streets shouting, Brexit, Brexit, and she's getting dirty looks from Remainers. But also she disgraces herself with the neighbours because she's having a hot flush, and she runs out into the garden and sort of finds that her boob has escaped her bra, and the neighbours see it. Like, oh my God, you know, what on earth is going on? And she's so embarrassed to leave the house that she orders a beekeeper's suit.
Oh, wow, how funny.
So she can completely disguise herself. And then she's going around looking in a beekeeper's suit.
I'll be honest with you, I've been trying to get the books. I mean, I have the your book on Oscar Wilde, which, can you tell us the title again?
Yeah, it's The Resurrection of Oscar Wilde, A Cultural Afterlife.
And it's absolutely wonderful. Just absolutely wonderful book. And of course it's on a serious note, but I've been trying desperately, because I'm in the United States and you're in United Kingdom, and I've been trying desperately to get the other books, or some of your work has been in anthologies, correct? You have actually been published in anthologies. So, and I'm finding it's difficult to get the books in the United States.
Yes, it will be at the moment, but Jenny Bean is not out yet. That's why you probably won't be able to get it. Isn't actually
right.
Out yet.
Well, that one you can't, right? Because it's not been published. That I knew. But even your other works.
Yes, I mean, I have lots of short stories available. This one is in an anthology called Gifted, published by Bridge House Publishing, and it's just been released. And it's called Strictly Most Haunted: My Story, and it's about a character who has a rather unnerving experience on a train, and she's kind of got mediumistic tendencies, but really wants to be a dancer. More than that, I'm not saying. But if you go to my website, which is www.julia-wood.com, there are links on there to where to buy the anthologies. But there is also, I do some readings of them, like teaser readings, the first couple of paragraphs. So
yes. That I've seen. And I was hoping that some of them would be on Audible, a type of Audible system where they're actually read. That where they're actually read. But because it's difficult to have them mailed here. I'm finding that a little bit difficult to have them mailed to the United States. Some of the anthologies, perhaps. I guess it depends on the publishing house.
Right. Okay. I mean, it might be worth just asking the publishing house. You can, when you clicked it on the link, they might be able to tell you. I'm not sure, to be honest. I didn't know that they weren't. Because that's kind of a bit annoying, obviously, because you want people all over the world to read your books, and so that's a little bit annoying.
yes, and absolutely, and because I've listened to everything, and I was just so impatient to get the books, and I couldn't understand why I was having difficulty, because of course you have to go on to if you're using something like Amazon, you have to go on to the Amazon version in the UK, which is different. You have to have like another account. So with more complications, to get the books, because I find that I wanted to read all of because you have short stories, of course, but you also have put on. You've gone places to read some of them, because you have actually done acting as well, with some parts that you've written. Yes. Can you tell the audience a little bit about that? You've actually written the scripts yourself.
Yes. I mean, I've got, I've written them. Some of them are monologues and some of them are slam poems. So they're just basically, and the poems that I performed there are two poems from the Jenny Bean novel, and one is called Jenny Says Let's Talk. And then there's Jenny Says Let's Talk, the reprise. And the first one is about her going through the menopause during lockdown and how she sort of struggled. And it's hilarious, but obviously there is that undertone that it was actually quite distressing for her at times. And then The reprise is about how she kind of comes out of the other side of the menopause, and now the lockdown is over and she's feeling more empowered and completely different about herself as a woman, and about her body and about just everything, really. And so those two poems are from Jenny Bean, and there's another one that she writes in the novel, because what Jenny does in the novel is she composes songs and writes poems. And so I perform some of those songs and poems at live venues to sort of help to sort of get the Jenny Bean fever going, once the story comes out. And so the cholesterol one, it's she writes a letter to her cholesterol, because she's just been after the lockdown, and she was doing that whole thing that a lot of us were doing, junk food, alcohol. Yeah. And then afterwards she's like, oh my God, my cholesterol has just like shot up. And so she writes a letter to her cholesterol, which is half actually sung. I actually sing bits of it. And that's wonderful. I mean, because let's face it, these are really serious issues, but with a comic bent, but still serious. There's still that serious undertone in the stories. I mean, life, to put it that way, maybe not serious, but life challenges, life events that are very definitely there. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And now you're writing another, right? Isn't there another book that's out there that you're working on? It's not a short story, it's a book, right? Is it a young man?
I've written a play called The Unfurling of Jeremy Blossom, which is against quite a lot of comedic element to it, but it's actually quite dark, because it's about a gay lad trying to come out as gay during the AIDS and Clause 28, which is kind of the late 80s, when Clause 28 was introduced, and a lot of young gay people struggled with that, and he struggles with it, and his Oscar Wilde is his idol. And so in the story, he sort of is visited by the ghost of Oscar Wilde, and they help each other to kind of find peace.
And that's a play. Now, has that been put on?
Not yet. No, I'm still looking for a home for that one. I have submitted it to various things, but I've been focusing a lot on Jenny Bean this year because of the CWIP prize, and because obviously it's a good opportunity. And at the moment I'm working on a flash fiction piece for the CWIP flash fiction competition, which has to be about festive fun and some kind of faux pas that happens. So embarrassing things happen to the protagonist in context.
And so now, how does your day look as a writer? Because I'm sure you're always thinking about your characters, you're thinking about what to do next.
I go shopping for my character sometimes. I don't buy anything. It's great, saving me a fortune. But I go and I see a pair of shoes and I know Jenny would like those. And she doesn't have the same taste as I do. She's not really into the whole Victorian thing. She's more modern. And so she goes shopping. I go shopping and I go, this is what Jenny Bean would wear. So, the character, when you have a character, when you create a character, they do live very much in your head, and they're there a lot of the time, and they're very alive in your head, I think. And you do live with them. It's like having a lodger, a squatter.
Well, it's like another person, really.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it, it's another person, especially as you're explaining that she wears different kinds of clothing. So when you're out and you're looking, because that's what that character would do. So they are very much alive.
Yes, they're very much alive. Yeah.
And so now, how does that work? Because you really have your hands in all types of writing, right? Yes. I mean, you're talking about plays, and you're talking about short stories, and you're talking about novels. How do you switch that on and off? Like, how does that work? That which you're going to do at what time?
I don't multitask. I have ADHD, so I have to hyper focus. I don't multitask. The thought of multitasking makes me want to have a nervous breakdown or something. So no, I don't multitask. I will focus on one thing, and I will do that, and then I will take a break from that to do something else and come back to it. Because when you're working on stuff, you can get so bogged down in it that you don't see the wood for the trees, as it were, and you can lose sight of what you're doing with the project and where it's going. And so taking regular breaks to do something else is a good way of not allowing that to happen, if you like.
And so do you do that with the performances that you do? Because if you're working on say you're working on a short story, do you go and perform something else that you've already done? Can you do it that way, or is that also multitasking and you can't get that done?
Okay, I can do that, because if it's something I've already written. I mean, I'm working on the festive flash fiction at the moment, and I'm actually performing tomorrow night at a big poetry slam event in Leicester, performing some poems that I've already written. And that's okay. I can sort of compartmentalize
that you can do. Now, tell me, how has that changed? Because you were doing this before the pandemic. I mean, this is your career and this is what you were doing. How has it changed, or has it changed since the pandemic, with going out to events and performing and getting your work out there? Is it different?
No, I wouldn't say so. Not that I know. I didn't perform before the pandemic. It started, I think what happened for me was something. I used to be a performer years ago, and I've always enjoyed doing performances. And I also read, I have this YouTube channel called Julia's Poetry by Candlelight, where I read other people's poetry. That I was doing that during the lockdown as well. And that some of my favorite poets, like A. Houseman, John Betjeman, and poets like that. But I didn't really do that before the lockdown. It's sort of, I came into it very much from the sort of multimedia angle of, I'm going to use video as another medium so that I can put my work out there and feel like there's still a world out there, and something to focus on during the lockdown. And so it very much started there. And then after the pandemic, I really got into this through a friend of mine, slam poetry performances, because she's been doing it for a while, and she said, "Oh, come down and perform some poetry." So I did, and I had a whale of a time, and it's great. And I really got the laughs as well with with the comedic stuff, which is fantastic, and quite surprising, because I didn't know how it was going to go down. So it was a bit of a not a gamble.
I've heard you read other poets' work. I've heard you read that on video, but now you're going and you're doing your own work as well out there. So this is all after the pandemic. So how have people gotten back? I mean, you can't compare because you really weren't out there before at these live events, but are people getting back to everything now? Are there a lot of people that attend these events?
It's quite well attended. I mean, it depends on if it's in the week, it's less well attended. But that's probably would have been the case, because obviously during the week, like, people work and stuff, and so they don't. So they don't really necessarily go out. And Thursdays in Leicester seems to be a night when it's like Thursday's the new Friday in Leicester. I don't know if that's true in America, but certainly in Leicester, it's like Thursdays become a night when people do things, especially creative things. I'm a member of Leicester Writers Club, and we meet on Thursday evenings.
And now Leicester's where is that in England, of course, but is it in the north, in the south?
In the Midlands, so it's like which is kind of mid country, I suppose you would say.
Now, do you travel all over England with your work?
No, I've only just started performing, so not really. It's just literally locally.
Right. So you haven't gone to read part of your book. You haven't gone.
No, I haven't, but I'm not averse to doing it, and I think that when the Jenny Bean comes out, I do want to, because my novel is with Farrago Press at the moment, because they're publishing the sequel. I sort of said, would you want to look at the main novel? And they they're interested, but I don't know yet. I've not heard anything, so I'm still waiting for that. But obviously, I'm looking for a publisher and an agent, preferably for the main Jenny Bean novel.
And how did that happen, that the main novel is the prequel? How did that occur?
Because what happened was I wanted to enter the CWIP Fiction Novel Award for Jenny Bean, but I couldn't enter it because it didn't match the word count at the time, because when I was writing Jenny Bean during the lockdown, it was about 60,000 words. And the publishers wanted it to be 80 or 85 or something. And I just couldn't get the word count up in time because I didn't have enough time to do it. And I only found out about the prize about sort of 3 or 4 months into writing a novel, because I pretty much during the summer of that year, and I knew it wasn't going to meet the word count, so I had to withdraw from the competition, which is very annoying. But then they set up a short story competition, and I thought, well, I want an excuse to write a follow-up to Jenny Bean, because I very much see it as not just a multimedia project, but as a series as well. And so I thought, okay, write a short, and it's not that short a short story, it's like almost a novella. I mean, it's 10,600 words. So it's a long short story, or it's a mini novel.
Right, like you said, novella.
And that got shortlisted for the CWIP Prize, which means it's being published next year. But of course, it means it's being published before the novel. So, like I said, it's doing things a little bit differently, or a different way round.
Right, but because of course it was to get into the event that they were offering at the time, the contest that was on there, that was out there, and. But I do see what you're saying, that it very well can be a series, because I could see that character has a lot to say.
And a lot of different situations and scenarios that, you know, we find her in. Because it's written in the style of a blog, so it's like a sort of modern day Adrian Mole in a way, or Bridget Jones. It's in that blog format.
Yes. And now, do you actually have a blog as well? Do you write things on your website, or no, you don't have time for that?
But no, not really. But I will. If I think I've I bought the actual domain for Playing Silly Bloggers, which is Jenny's blog handle address, whatever. And so if I ever do anything with it, I probably will maybe put some little things out as Jenny Bean.
Yes, as her. Yes, as the character. And so now tell me, how does the Victorian, I mean, clearly your home is decorated in a Victorian fashion, so it's something that you like. How did you come to decide on wearing Victorian garb always? Because your outfits are absolutely exquisite.
Thank you. Well, so it was really like when I late teens and I became interested in Oscar Wilde, and I read his letter de profundis to Lord Alfred Douglas from Reading Jail. And it really just changed my life, really. And that's how I became interested in Oscar Wilde and the period in general. But I mean, I've always been drawn to drama and kind of being dramatic. I've probably always been a dramatic person. So, I just became really immersed in the period and in the styles of the period and the glamour and the history. And I know, obviously, that life was unequivocally awful for most people in the Victorian period. Obviously, you know, you pick the bit you like, but
right, but it is a look. It is a look, and you're known for that look. You're known, specifically for that Victorian look. I have to say that on a more sober note, the book about Oscar Wilde, I guess for me, it really made me think, because I never thought how bad it was before. I mean, we're living in the 21st century, and I live in New York. Even though I'm outside of New York City, it might be because it's on the coast, maybe a little bit more liberal. And I never really thought how terrible it was.
Yeah, difficult.
For someone who knew that they were, and I don't want to say different, who knew that their life was
going to be
was to be partnered with the same sex. That book really opened my eyes to really just how horrible it was time. And he was, for all intents and purposes, he was quite famous at the time, if I'm not mistaken. He was famous. His plays had all.
He was stupendously famous. I mean, he sort of did have the world in the palm of his hand, and then just like that, kind of lost it all. And it is a really terribly sad story. And I think, you know, we can argue that there was a great deal of folly on his behalf in suing Queensberry. But then you see nowadays, the irony, of course, is he would have got an injunction for harassment, because Queensberry was, Bosie's father was harassing them.
Yes.
And of course, because what they were doing wasn't legal, he ends up being the one on trial. But actually,
it was just terrible.
With telegrams, and he was, you know, really quite vile. He was a pretty vile man, actually, I think.
Yeah, I mean, well, definitely vindictive in some way. It was a hatred that was abnormal, excessive. I mean, just horrid hatred, and ruined another person. But it really opened my eyes. I have to say that as we're talking to the audience, it's well worth the read for everybody, because it really opened my eyes, not realizing that it was not that long ago that people were persecuted for whomever they chose to love. It really is quite sad. And that's why I found that the story that you were writing about the gay young man, at a time when, you know, that's like switched so over, but it's the same type of issue. It was in I know you didn't write it in the 80s, but it was taking place in the, I guess, in the late 80s, after AIDS had become sadly quite common to hear. What made you decide to do that as well? Was that something you felt you had to tell the audience, had to tell the world?
I think, yes. I think that I was really deeply affected by the introduction of Clause 28 in the late 80s. And I think it's because I was, I guess you would say, artistically parented by gay men. And Mark Almond from Soft Sound was my kind of teen idol. And I still have a great deal of respect for him as an artist. And he really helped shape me as an artist, you know. And then it was the Smiths, although they've fallen into disrepute recently, sadly. But there was the Smiths. And then Wilde, and through Morrissey, I became interested in Oscar Wilde. That's how it was like a stepping stone thing, and that path, it took me on that particular journey, on that path. And then it was just how horrendous life was for people that I really admire and look up to, and that have really inspired me. But, you know, obviously I think that I come to it, if you like, from a point of view of, I've always been kind of different. I've never really fitted in anywhere. And so I related on that basis. But I think it was a lot more than that. I think it's also because as an 80s kid, I grew up with that whole kind of camp culture and sensibility, and found it incredibly liberating. And I've gone out on the gay scene for years because I love the vibe, and it's a nicer vibe. And you don't get all the hassle that you get in straight clubs, although I don't go clubbing anymore. My clubbing days are over. But when I did in my 20s, certainly I was.
Me too. So I was, so I relate. I was there, and it is true that you're not as hassled, and it was more open and accepting of anybody that wanted to be different. And so.
Yes. And it was the first time I felt like people understood me, because I'd get gay men sort of saying, I love your look and I love what you do. And I felt like they understood me, and they understood where I was coming from, you know, but it was about art. It was about a look. And when you know, that clothing too is a creative process.
And then you were living it. And so you felt that you needed to write about it.
Yes.
Because you specifically make it a gay young man.
Yes.
In a time, and it is a bit dark, but it is very telling of the time also.
Yes.
And how do you juggle that, the serious information, because it is serious information, and then the laughter, the comedy on the ordinary and the everyday, but yet issues nonetheless? How do you juggle that?
Well, I think it's really about sort of having you have this underlying sense of, this is what I'm writing about, and then the humor just kind of comes out of that somehow. But it's sort of like almost as if I think we can say that we can talk about something, and we can talk about it in very dark terms, or we can talk about it in light-hearted terms, but the thing that we talk about remains relatively unchanged below that surface, if that makes sense. And so it's always there, you know. Just like, I mean, there's this wonderful sketch in the very, very last Blackadder series. I don't know if you've ever seen Blackadder. Blackadder goes forth. They're going over the top. I mean, it's so sad. And then sort of they're making jokes, and they're cracking jokes about, you know, and because it's a comedy. But of course, then it takes that slightly dark twist, and then when it plays out, the music doesn't play, and there's just the poppy fields, and you know, we all know what happens at the end. And so I think it's probably easier when you have an existing event that you're writing about, because everybody knows the darkness is there. You don't have to explain it. Like lockdown, people went through it. We all went through it. So you can, you know, everyone knows that there are darker things going on under the surface, and you almost don't need to really say them. You just need to sometimes occasionally acknowledge they're there. But it's a difficult balance. And I don't always get it right. That's the thing. It's always, you know, everything is kind of like, you do your work and you do your best to pick something, and you hope that it works. And like I say, sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. So,
but it is very true that we all know that the darkness is there, and
yes,
maybe not making light of it, but having some comedy in between doesn't really detract from the seriousness of what's there. But the comedy helps you to maybe laugh and be uplifted.
Yes.
And you know, especially in the dark times.
I think with comedy as well, that there is a sense of anarchy about comedy, because it's disruptive as a force, isn't it? Because it plays with our expectations, it turns things on their head. So, you know, most comedy is predicated upon surprise or some kind of overturning of an existing presumption. And so, you know, it's very much, I think that comedy does have that defiance about it. It's almost like sticking two fingers up at the world and saying, yes, you know, I know this is really terrible, but I'm going to laugh because I found something to laugh about, but also because it's life affirming. And I think that when you're faced with things that feel life threatening, then having a phenomenon like comedy that is life affirming is very cathartic, because it turns everything on its head and it makes you feel reaffirmed as a human, that actually, you know, yeah, we're facing terrible, terrible things, but you know,
right. It's like you said, sticking two fingers up to everything, because that we know that it's dark and it's tragic, but yet we're going to find something to laugh about.
Yes.
In the midst of all of this, more or less.
Yeah.
To give those chuckles in between, I think. And now where do you go from here? Where do you plan on going writing wise? Where you want to concentrate strictly on Jenny Bean, or you want to go
I want to get more I want to get more involved in sort of writing for theatre and monologues and things like that. But Jenny Bean is Jenny's taking to the stage, obviously, because I'm doing these performances of Jenny. Definitely more Jenny Bean material in novel form as well, that I have planned, because I do see it very much as a series, and I'm letting it take me on this rather quirky little journey. So it's always a surprise to me when something suddenly takes a turn where you go, oh, actually, you know what? I can perform this. I can do some of her poems. I can do some of her songs or whatever, and perform them on stage. But I have more ideas for stories and novels from Jenny Bean, definitely. Another big novel, I think, at some point.
And so now, but you also want to work on plays. So now we said earlier, you have one play already out there, and that's really different, a different type of writing, isn't it? Do you have, right? Isn't it more direction? I mean, the story's there that you're writing as a play, but don't you have to be more technical with a play?
It's a different form. I mean, all writing is technical in the sense that you have to learn the medium in which you work. So all writing is technical. You know, novels don't just write themselves. You have to kind of be aware of the structure of a novel and how novels work and what needs to happen during a novel to make it work. And it's with a play, I think you're more aware of it because of the fact that you have, you know, the name of the character and then the speech and then the name and then the speech and then and it's much more. I think you're more aware of the structure because of it. It's less free flowing in the way that writing a novel may be free flowing. But then again, I've written novels for a lot longer, and I've not written that many plays. So it might just be that I've not flourished quite yet in the genre. Although, you know, I think that I'm quite pleased with the Jeremy Blossom play. I think it does probably need more work. But I'm definitely going to write a play involving Jenny Bean, a proper full play, or adapt the novel in that kind of ilk.
And that would be wonderful to see on stage.
Yes.
Jenny come alive with what she says. And then how do you get that out there? How does that work? Because you already have the one play, you want to make Jenny a play. Do you have to find someone who will put it out there? Do you do it yourself? How does that work?
Well, what I usually do, what I would do was what I've done with Jenny Bean is I enter lots of competitions and see what happens with that, because that's what I've done with this, and it's got me this publishing deal with Farrago with Jenny Bean, and obviously I now have that connection. I now have those kind of, if you like, so I'm hoping that those contacts will remain, so that I can do things in the future. But you know, that's what I would do, and then there's always the Writers and Artists Yearbook to submit plays, and you can submit plays that way. But I'd probably look at just trying to raise the money and get it performed myself. I wouldn't be in it. I wouldn't perform it myself.
No, right. You would, right. Of course, there would be actors.
Really
and then, but you also perform you were reading poetry, other people's poems. You were doing some of your own work. So you're actually performing to some degree also.
Yes.
So now if you're asked to travel with that's different than traveling with your play, because from what I understand, plays open in different locations, or people are anxious to have them.
Yes. I mean, I don't know that I would travel to every single play, depending on where it was. I mean, I had my play performed in the Hall Theatre in Crawley in 95 when I was still a student, and that was the Lord Alfred Douglas play called The Truth, the Whole Truth, the Douglas story. And that was performed, and I did go to that. It was 2 nights, and I stayed over, and I did go, and that was quite exciting.
Right, and that you wrote yourself.
Yes, and seeing your work brought to life by actors is an incredibly exhilarating experience.
No, it must be to see your words being said, being interpreted by actors.
Yes.
And now, so what's next for you? Because you do so many different things in such a creative way.
Like I say, I don't really know, other than more Jenny Bean, definitely, and branching out more into monologues and plays, and obviously looking into, my ideal would be to get Jenny Bean televised. That would be my absolute ideal. I think it would work really, really well. She says modestly, but I think it would personally.
Oh, yes, I could see that it would work well. It would translate well.
Yes,
that way.
Yes.
Now, would you ever consider coming to the United States to do to put any play on, or to do any of your really monologues?
Lived in America, to be honest. I would find it quite interesting seeing how, because it's always interesting seeing how different audiences respond to you. I mean, when I perform the slam poetry, some of the stuff, because it's about menopause, and I did it one time, there's this audience, and they were all men under 35, and I think they just didn't quite, and it's not their fault, it's,
right, that just is not their experience.
Because it was like about hot flushes and about mood swings and about all of this stuff, and of course, it really depends on the audience, doesn't it? But yeah.
I'm thinking it does depend on the audience, because and I might not be a good judge of that, because I have to tell you the truth, I really only watch British programming when I do have the time to sit down. I only watch British programming. So, and my daughter has been raised on British programming. So I'm not sure if I would be
interesting.
The most, oh yes. In fact,
honest, I don't watch a lot of American television. I have to be honest. I watch mostly British stuff. Just one of those things, really. But yeah.
I mean, we do. And my daughter, she was young, and it was only she and I in a home at the time. My husband had been deployed for one of the wars, and she was young, and she could only hear, if I wasn't speaking, she would only hear British people speaking. So when we would go into the supermarket and she heard the American version spoken, she would look at me and ask me, why are they speaking like that? Because she wasn't around that. All she heard was the British programming. So I don't know if I'm that good of a judge, but I guess what you're saying is true. I mean, laughter's laughter, comedy's comedy. But I'm wondering how different audiences would relate to different things that are being said. It's an interesting,
don't they? Everyone's got something, I guess, like to bring to the proverbial table in terms of how they relate to pieces of work. And that's what always makes it interesting, I think, whether you're an artist, whether it's your own work or whether it's me bringing something of my own to someone else's work. I always think it's interesting, isn't it, how people respond.
Yes, it's so true, right? How one responds. And I guess if it hits home.
Yes.
No matter where you live, right? No matter what side of the world you live on, if it hits home with what's being said. But comedy, I think the laughter is so important right now.
Yes, it is absolutely important, definitely.
That was something, because I would chuckle when I watched your YouTube channel, and I know that it was you speaking to the world, but the laughter was so needed, and of course it's still so needed. That's why I think that people who write comedy, they give so much to the world.
Yes.
And do you actually like doing the comedy, or it's just something that just comes naturally, or it's just one other genre that you deal with?
It's something I've gradually kind of morphed into doing, to be honest. But I do really enjoy doing it. I definitely enjoy doing it, because when things feel a bit dark, it's great, because you just it's fun to work on. It's light and fun to work on. But I don't just write comedy. I have written non-fiction, and my short stories, a lot of them are kind of paranormal and ghost stories, and exploring the afterlife and exploring different people's perceptions of whether there is one or not, or just creepy stories. So. But I guess you'd probably say there's probably elements of humour in those as well somewhere, because it's sort of natural. I think if you've got it, and it comes out in what you do. Like it permeates everything.
Yes, I know. I have to agree with that. But I know that you've done the ghost stories. I know you've done the paranormal. Again, so difficult for me to get them here. And maybe I wasn't looking in the right area, because they are all published in different anthologies, correct? They're found in different anthologies from different publishing houses.
Yes, in some cases. I mean, I have several published by Bridge House, because I've worked with them before, and they're a lovely company to work with. But most of them, yes, they're all published in different anthologies.
And so I'm going to have to see. I will have to definitely be in touch with you, because the only one that I was able to get, and that was a while ago, was the Oscar Wilde book. That came relatively quickly. I just had difficulty getting the other ones, especially the anthologies. And I really did. I really wanted to read them. And I like comparing, contrasting, like when I like an author, but they're writing in different different genres. I want to see how it compares and contrasts.
Yes. And of course, Oscar Wilde did that. He wrote in many genres, just about all the genres, really.
Yes.
And I like that versatility. It's interesting.
Yeah, I would think so. I would think that as an author, you want to try your hand at everything, right? Because you want to stretch yourself.
Absolutely. I think you do. You want to challenge yourself and you want to see what you're capable of. And you don't find that out unless you slightly come out of your comfort zone and sort of push yourself to do things that you might not necessarily naturally do, and see where you go with it, really.
Now, do you find that the work that you do is I mean, it's a healing process for a lot of other people. People come to it to heal for whatever reason. Do you find that it's actually a healing process for yourself?
Yes. I mean, I recently, back in March, I had to have my cat put to sleep, and it's just devastating. I cannot believe the intensity of the grief, and because it came out of nowhere, because it wasn't something that I expected to happen, and I had to have him euthanized, and it was just utterly horrible. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of work I will be putting out about pet loss at some point. But it's taking me so long to process. It was such a shock. He wasn't young, but he wasn't that. He was 12 or 13. And so,
but it's devastating. It's devastating, the loss of.
I wrote a letter to my cat. It's not been published yet, but yes, writing is a way that you heal. It is definitely a way that you heal, because you're taking control of a thing that feels uncontrollable, I suppose. And one of the ways in which art is a consolation and a healer is that it does perform that function of giving you back a sense of control, because I can put these things into words. I can shape these unshapable, terrible things and make them into something, and hopefully make them into a thing of beauty. And that is a great healer for the soul, I guess.
Oh, indeed. Indeed. Every time you can put it into words, naturally an author does it better. Not everybody's an author, but not everybody can put to paper, but
be able to do that. I feel very fortunate that I have that gift, because I don't know, it must be so hard if you don't have that gift, or if you haven't developed that gift, because there's no saying that just because people are not artists, they can't be artists. I think to a degree, I think we all have that potential creatively. I mean, I really, really like to encourage new talent, because I think that it's really fantastic when you get people that say, I'm going to try doing this, I've never done it before. And, I really think it's about perseverance. That's really what it's about. And,
yes.
Just the people who didn't give up.
No, and it's very true. I mean, to put pen to paper to express your thoughts, and even if it's not published, especially in the healing process, with the grief, grief, loss. I mean, it's a wonderful way to try to process that.
Yes, it's definitely, definitely.
And let me know, how can people get your books? I know that they're different publishers. What's your website again? Let's tell the people that they can actually go on there and click to see what all your writings are about and where they can go, right? I think they direct towards the publishing houses.
Yes, it's www.julia-wood.com.
And so then we can go on there.
Underscore, it's hyphen, julia-wood.com.
Yeah, so then we can go on there and see. I do want to thank you so much for coming on today. I know you're very busy, and I know for a writer to have to put down everything to come and talk to an audience, but I appreciated it, because I thought that the concept of comedy and laughter was so important to put forth today.
Very important,
even though we've spoken about other works, that maybe don't have the comedy bent, but I thought that the laughter part was so important.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
But again, I thank you so much, and hopefully we will speak soon, and I will keep you posted. I will let you know definitely if I could get the books. I will definitely send you information if I could get them as readily as I would hope.
Thank you very much. That's great. Thank you, and it was a pleasure to speak to you.
Oh, it was lovely to speak to you, Julia. Thank you again. Have a wonderful evening. Bye now.
Bye.